In today's Farm Report, supplementing a cow's ration with mineral may be important to keeping cattle happy and healthy. Emily Wilmus with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares some tips on how to maintain proper cattle diet, but as always, check with your nutritionist for specific herd needs.
The upper Midwest is abundant in cool season grasses and grass legume mixes that are perfect for grazing beef cattle in the summer months. Pastures should be providing everything your cattle need from a nutritional standpoint, but it may not be providing some key trace minerals. Calcium and phosphorus are typically high in forages or diets fed to cows in the upper Midwest. However, magnesium may need to be supplemented when nitrogen or potassium concentration of forages is elevated due to fertilization. Also, many forages in the U.S. are limited in two microminerals, copper and zinc, and the concentration of selenium, another micromineral, is highly variable and can fluctuate from limiting to excessive in various regions of the country. Minimum trace mineral concentrations when feeding 2 ounces per cow per day for zinc, copper, and selenium in the supplement are 4,000 parts per million from zinc sulfate or zinc oxide, 800 parts per million from copper sulfate, and 10 to 20 parts per million selenium in areas where selenium is needed. When formulating mineral supplements for Simmental, Limousin, Charolais, or Menage cattle and their crosses, it is important to remember that their requirement for copper is 1.5 times higher than the base requirement of 10 parts per million. Similarly, Jersey and Brahman cattle are more susceptible to copper toxicity. Heifers exposed to breeding for their first year are actively growing and often may not harvest grass in sufficient amounts, or the quality may be compromised. Nutritional deficiencies experienced during the first breeding year lead to poor winter body reserves and poor reproductive performance during the second breeding. Whether weight gain is required for heifers to winter in adequate body condition or to recuperate from a poor summer forage supply, prudent choice of supplements permits reaching the desired objective in a cost-effective manner. When supplementing energy to grazing cattle, using starch supplements reduces forage intake. However, when supplementing energy in a moderate to high protein supplement, forage intake is not depressed significantly. Therefore, strategies to supplement growing cattle on moderate to high quality grassland depend on short and long-term management goals. If growth is required with no concern for reduction in forage intake, as may be the case for ensuring that lightweight bred heifers undergo catch-up growth, then high starch formulations are recommended. On the other hand, when attempting to optimize forage use of low starch, high protein formulations is recommended. This is Emily Wilmus with University of Minnesota Extension.
This week in Hawaii, the latest round of Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations, the first ministerial round of meetings since Trade Promotion Authority for the President of the United States was signed into law.
We've made significant progress in incredibly difficult and intensive negotiations over the last few months with our TPP partners.
The U.S. Trade Representative's chief agricultural negotiator, Darcy Vetter, last April talking to farm broadcasters. She has spent this past weekend with counterpart negotiators from the other 11 TPP nations in hopes of finalizing this trade deal. Among the key issues remaining, market access for dairy products from the U.S. and other TPP members into Canada. Vetter says in any negotiations, the hardest decisions are usually what left as talks approach a conclusion.
It's going to take us technical work and technical creativity and political will to get over the hump of these last negotiations, but all the countries at the table are actively engaged.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The message, call before your dig, applies to agriculture as well, especially since many pipelines do travel across farmland. Emily Wilmus with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office talks more about this free service offered here in the state of Minnesota.
Did you know there are over 2.6 million miles of pipeline in the United States today? Currently, there is over 500,000 of additional pipeline in planning, permitting, or under construction. The majority of U.S. pipelines are used for gas transmission and hazardous liquids. With so much pipeline buried around the country, it's no wonder that a large majority ends up near or on farmland. Have you ever heard of calling 811 or the catchphrase call before you dig? Recently, a survey of farmers with pipelines on their land was conducted, and the results showed that only 18% of those farmers had ever called 811 before digging. 18% is not a lot, especially when you consider how dangerous pipelines can be. Pipelines carry explosive materials, and if you hit one while digging, you could be liable for damages, not to mention the risk of injury or even death from hitting a pipeline. So, why wouldn't you call 811? Calling 811 is completely free. When you dial 811, you will be connected to your local one-call center. In Minnesota, it is the Gopher State One Call Center. If you have a smartphone, you can download the free Gopher State One Call application. The only information you need is the location of where you will be digging. The One Call Center will notify all affected facility operators, and the approximate location of pipelines and cables in the excavation area will be marked within 2 to 3 days. So, what activity constitutes needing to call 811? There is an exemption from calling for normal farming activities, so make sure you know the difference between farming and excavating. Farming activities include plowing, planting, cultivating, and harvesting at depths of less than 18 inches. Excavating activities include fence building, tiling, terracing, grading or contouring, deep tilling, soil sampling, tree and stump removal, clearing or grubbing, ditch cleaning, trenching, and augering. If you are doing any of these excavation projects, you need to call before you dig. Pipelines allow easy transport of gas and other hazardous liquids, but it's important that we respect where these pipelines are in order to keep ourselves and our farms safe. As one pipeline safety group puts it, it took years to make it a farm, and it takes one call to keep it safe. When you call 811 before digging, you reduce the chance of causing damage to less than 1%. Remember to call before you dig. It is completely free and will help keep you safe. For additional information about buried pipelines and the free calling center, visit www.gopherstateonecall.org or www.commongroundalliance.com. This is Emily Wilmus with University of Minnesota Extension.
We are seeing fed cattle prices dropping from their previous record highs over the last few weeks. Agriculture Department livestock analyst Shale Shagam says we've got several market forces at work here. First, many beef packers who normally enjoy positive returns this time of year are operating in the red right now.
That's really limiting their willingness to pay for fed cattle. And you have fed cattle prices, which have dropped down to about $145 a hundredweight.
They were averaging $161 during the spring quarter, so packers are reluctant to pay high prices for cattle.
That squeezes the feedlot operators because they paid well over $200 a hundredweight for feeder steers earlier in the year.
And so,
right now you're looking at a real battle sort of between the packers and the cattle feeders.
Meanwhile, on the price positive side, producers are holding back heifers for breeding and herd expansion.
Increasingly, it's going to put some pressure on supplies of cattle which are going to be available for placement to feedlots.
And put some upward pressure on cattle prices, at least until those heifers calve and those calves are ready for the feedlots. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Get the latest in farm news with me, Scott Colomb, at 6:35 a.m. and 4 p.m. here on AM 960 KLTF and 24/7 at fallsradio.com.